Thank you very much for joining us for breakfast on this Friday morning, the last day of the conference. So pretty encouraging to see so many people up so early. So looks like a few of you might have got an early night. Well, I'm Christian Easterday. I'm the CEO and Managing Director and Founding Director of Hot Chili. I'm figuring a fair few of you in the crowd are shareholders and know a bit of the story already. But for those who are not shareholders and are investors interested in Hot Chili, we're a top-tier copper developer in the world, one of the only 5 remaining plus 100,000 tonne per annum copper developers in the independent space. We've been developing this project on the coastline now for about 16 years since we listed on the Australian Securities Exchange. And I've been leading the company for 18 years as we've now got to a particular point in front of FID with the feasibility being undertaken and a revised pre-feasibility to be set at the end of the year on what is a continuing growth project in the large-scale copper space. So for those of you who were on the front foot last year buying shares at Rick Rule, this would have been one of your strong performers in your portfolio. About a 4 times return in the past 15 months or so. The company just recently completed a transaction with Osisko Royalties, or OR, which has further strengthened the cash balance of the company as we embark upon a very, very aggressive growth strategy this year. So we completed a $40 million institutional placement at the beginning of this year as the company's share price continued to re-rate. That provided a significant amount of treasury, and now in a non-dilutive funding mood, something of a no-brainer for Hot Chili really with its partners OR. We're able to extend our existing 1.1% royalty on Costa Fuego on the 1 billion tonnes that we have established in resource, and we've been able to extend that onto the new Leva property. So what's really important about that deal, and I thought I'll speak about some of these things in a little bit more detail this morning as I wasn't able to address a lot of things in a 10-15 minute talk in the main stage. But the recent announcement that just went into the market with OR is extremely significant for the see-through value on Hot Chili. So that was a 1.1% royalty for $15 million US originally. It's now a 1.1% royalty for $30 million US, and that was put on a pre-resource deposit at Leva. So that's given the company now a significant war chest to complete all of these key catalysts as we push in towards FID. Another really strong see-through value event occurred about 6 weeks ago in our backyard, or in our sandbox, as I like to say. So what you're looking at there is a map of Costa Fuego on the coastline of Chile, down at low elevation on the Pan-American Highway. Our existing resource bases in red there to the north that you can see where central processing will be on the western side of the highway, and our location of our new Leva discovery to the south. In pink you'll see another property which was certainly part of my consolidation strategy for over a decade, and a property unfortunately that Hot Chili was not able to consolidate from its private owners. A couple of years ago that property made its way into a junior on the TSX, 90% owned by its Chilean shareholder, and just recently it attracted a significant 90-odd million investment from G Mining, supported by Sumitomo and Franco-Nevada. While we welcome the interest in the area and some strong names into the regional chessboard that you're seeing there, what we are very, very impressed at is the share price of Tintina and the response to that strategic investment by G Mining. So it's a company that is now sporting about a $700 million Canadian market capitalisation in the last 6 weeks since that transaction occurred. So that is very significant for Hot Chili, given that we're holding about 4 to 5 times the resource base surrounding this project, about 4 times the post-tax NPV of this project, which is sporting the same upfront capital, and importantly at an advanced pre-feasibility stage with a third asset coming onto our books, looking to transform 1.5 billion to 1 billion to 1.5 billion tonnes. So some very, very encouraging recent developments in the area continue to show very strong see-through value on the company's share price. And we've been talking about see-through value on the share price, whether it's the advanced nature of what Hot Chili's put together here, or whether it's the resource base, which is just sitting under Tier 1 at the moment and will likely move over that mark shortly. We've always sat at a significant re-rate opportunity for our shareholders and for our investors. That re-rate opportunity was significantly higher a year ago, and we've been closing that gap, but we still sit at about a 2.5 multiple out on the valuations of our peers in this space. And what we've also been seeing is an increased amount of mergers and acquisitions going on in the copper space. So this is the hottest metal market in the world now. It's the highest metal market by value in the world. It's overtaken iron ore. You're now officially in the copper age. I know that we've been talking about it for a long, long time. This cycle was coming and it's here. I imagine that it's going to continue to rise through the 6s and probably approach the $7 mark sooner than we think, just as it approached $5 and $6 sooner than we thought. So we're in a structurally constrained market where large copper assets that are advanced in the development space are very few and far between, and they're being picked off one at a time. The most recent was Cactus with Arizona Sonora for about a $1.4 billion transaction with Hudbay about 3 or 4 months ago now. So we're seeing PNAVs driving towards 0.5, 0.6, and when you do those numbers on Hot Chili, you come up with a similar ceiling of value which we have to climb. I'll just briefly touch on the projects and some of the more interesting aspects of the projects for those who are attending this morning in a little bit more detail, and then I thought we'll probably open up to some Q&A from the audience. But just quickly, we are going to talk about Leva because this is really driving the share price. The results coming out of this property, 35 kilometres to the south of Costa Fuego, have now started to achieve world-class standard. This large hub that we've been developing on the Chilean coastline, a 20-year mining hub, is about to be joined by something that is probably going to lift this resource base 50% and add similar to the mine life, where the economics appear to be about to dramatically change. One of the key work streams this year for Hot Chili is its preparation for our environmental impact assessment. So we've spent over a decade now on permitting. We have all of the easement corridors to establish our water and power set up, 50 kilometres to port. We have all of the surface rights taken in. We have a decade of community programs that have gone into the area, our water secured in the area, and we'll talk about that later, and a MOU for port access for a port that's built right next to us secured. So we have all of the infrastructure accesses and permitting at a very advanced stage. Once we can submit our environmental impact assessment, which is due to be submitted in the second quarter of next year, we anticipate on being on a fairly streamlined process through to approval with first production in 31 at this stage. So we always start with this slide because it's a very interesting slide. It talks to firstly location and infrastructure advantage, elevation advantage, which has always been a big aspect of Hot Chili's story. Developing a big project down on the coastline at 700 metres is a hell of a lot easier than developing it at 4,000 metres where our large neighbouring projects all sit. So we're leveraging off of those opportunities. We're building a central processing hub that can draw in multiple large-scale deposits from this area, all within trucking distance. And the hot chili story has been a very patient, very persistent story. We've built this over a very, very long time, and the third piece of the puzzle, Domeyko, which contains the Leva resource now, or the Leva discovery, sits right next to that project, Dos Amigos, which has been invested in by the Geniac family. So it's very pleasing to see a discovery sitting right next to the number one target in the area for hot chili for the last decade that is now starting to overtake that deposit on scale and on grade. So perhaps you never want to get your first prize in life. Maybe the second prize turns out to be the first prize eventually. So what you're looking at here is the time progression since we secured this option, about 7 years to build a relationship with the family that owned the central lease, and then take in all of the rest of the leases to be able to get our hands on this. But the results have been very impressive, all from surface, all containing very wide, high-grade copper-gold intersections, but starting to put out 500, 700 metre, 400 metre intersections from surface. And so we've seen a deposit that has really given us a high-grade core that is accessible from surface. We weren't sure about this in the early stages of the drilling. A lot of our drilling was actually getting success at about 200, 250 metres depth. And in the last 3 or 4 months, we've been able to do all of the up-dip shallow drilling once we've got access in and above the old historical oxide open pit above this. So we've been finding an extensively mineralised oxide zone sitting on top of the deposit, and we've been seeing a high-grade core extending directly below that, and now down to about 600 metres vertical and open in nearly every direction. So the footprint is not that complicated. It's funny, you start with discoveries where you don't know whether to go left, right, up or down, and as you start to build your footprint, now 26,000 metres completed already, 3 drill rigs on the ground and a 4th rig about to operate at the end of the month, we can see a very, very simple and clear porphyry footprint starting to emerge, and you're looking at copper here. So this high-grade core that is giving us great sulfide intersections at depth has also, as I said, got a very, very significant aspect to this deposit, which is very meaningful for Costa Fuego, and that is a high-grade starter pit. We started to see this in some of the up-dip early holes, and we've really started to lock in on that. I think we have around 17 drilling intercepts across the top of this deposit that all sport between 0.7 to 0.8% bulk copper grades. So that's very, very encouraging to see, because the material that you're looking at here looks likely to be impacting year 1, year 2 in the mine plan. And when you can put through material, and I know that often people will talk about a high-grade starter pit or higher grade assays, and what is exactly high grade in this business. It seems to be pretty loosely used term by CEOs. High grade for hot chili, when we're in the bulk copper space, where deposits in the world produce copper at 0.5%, where all of the pipeline of production coming is between 0.4 to 0.5% for any significant new copper supplier. When you can add bulk mineralisation running at 0.8, and sometimes some of our grades are up to 1% copper, 30-40% revenue boost on 20 million tonne per annum plants produce a lot of cash flow. You're talking about an extra $400 million of pretty much after margin profit. So what that means is that we can dramatically reduce the payback period for the funding on Costa Fuego using this deposit, and then extracting a lot of the better grade sulfide material out into the early part of the mine plan. So that starter pit has been very transformational. It's the third deposit that we found now in the bulk space for Costa Fuego, and certainly couldn't have come at a better time. We have a lot of drill results about to hit the market from this drill out at Leva. I think we have about now 26 drill holes in the laboratories And I say laboratories in plural because we've had to add a second laboratory. We've probably encountered about the worst assay turnaround times that I've experienced in my career. And so that's necessitated a second ISO certified laboratory to be added. So we're starting to see assays flowing from both labs now, and we're about to start putting out quite a lot more drilling news flow, and that will continue through to the end of the year to where Leva will take its first resource statement. So as I mentioned, the dimensions of the deposit, the depth that we're drilling it out to, pretty much focusing on the open pit component, are indicating that we're heading towards about a 500 million tonne addition. So this is a 50% lift on a resource base that has been built for 16 years. This takes us within the top 10 undeveloped copper resources in the independent space to about 6th. And so that's where we'll be positioning at the end of the year as a legitimate tier 1 copper developer with over 5 million tonnes of contained copper and over 5 million ounces of gold down at low elevation. So more important to that is what it's going to do to this hub. It adds a third deposit. As I mentioned, all central processing at Productora, and material that is higher grade from Leva will be trucked. We do have a longer future which is starting to play out at Leva. It looks like it will have a second period of mine life towards the end of this mine plan, just because of how large this is. But that will be about Hot Chili solving its transport and handling solution to ensure that we can move the dirt as cheaply as we can. So from a pre-feasibility put out 15 months ago to where we are now, we have a 20-year mine life that's heading to 30 years at the end of this year. We have about 116,000 tonne per annum metal production profile that is heading towards 150,000. And we have, I guess, a very, very uniquely positioned project in terms of timing. Something of this scale that is coming to the market early next decade probably sits about as well timed for the market in copper and for this cycle as you could get. So looking back on our pre-feasibility, these numbers will change, and what that ultimately leads to is the value of Hot Chili changing, the underlying value of our asset. At the moment, we can support a $1.2 billion post-tax net present value. And so when you're progressing strategic funding discussions, you're really concentrating on P/NAV ratios, on valuation metrics for deposits in this, or for developers in this class. For us to have the ability this year to turn $1.2 billion into $2 billion or greater, to turn 4.5 years payback into 2.5 years, to reduce our operating cost and push that into the first quartile, to lift our metal production, not just on gold, but also on copper, remembering, of course, that Leva is sporting a 70-metre oxide zone on a bulk tonnage pit. So that's a doubling of our oxide resources, and undoubtedly will lead Hot Chili to expanding significantly its leaching capacity. So this is a bottom quartile capital intensity project that is about to be a bottom quartile C1 cash cost project, and about to head to that magical 30-year mark, which is where you want these long life, large scale copper assets positioned. There's always a very, very important saying, but it's really meaningful in the copper space. Your timing is everything. These copper cycles are long run. Projects like this at 0.5% pour money in the good part of the cycle, and they've probably become one of the most profitable assets in the mining business when you're in the right type of cycle for copper. But when you're not, these assets operate on scale. It's about economy of scale, and it's about operating at the lowest unit rate you can. And that's about keeping the lights on so that our copper industry, which is grown from 20 million tonnes 7 years ago, sitting at a bit over 26 million tonnes now, and is trying to climb to 35 million tonnes by 2035, and people talking bigger numbers than that. This is an industry that is constrained with supply, that will only see new supply from major deposits like this, and there are not many around. So when you have a third discovery that can leverage your economics, allow you to restate your pre-feasibility, capture the rising commodity price since the last time that we did our pre-feasibility 15 months ago at $4.30, when you can add about close to $700 million of post-tax NPV just from the commodity price before you touch Leva, you can see that we are heading towards a project that is going to have one of the most superior set of financial numbers in the business. So leverage will increase, capital intensity will actually decrease slightly, and more importantly, our operating costs will start to move into, as I said, the first quartile of the industry. And we'll be very, very much well established as one of the top scale projects that is left outside of the majors. So Fernanda, one of my colleagues, our communications manager for Huasco region and for Chile, has joined us today, and she's welcomed everyone at the door. So Fernanda works in our communities team. It's one of the really big parts of our business that all of us in Hot Chili are very proud of. We've had over a decade of work in the local communities in which we operate, and we support a couple of the orphanages now for over a decade, and we have a very, very successful mental health program in the region where we're supporting a lot of the remote communities and remote townships. And that health program has now been extended. We also offer telehealth to the region. But the approach that Hot Chili has taken to integrate itself within the community has led to some of our community surveys now putting out some amazing numbers on awareness and acceptance by the community. Hot Chili's brand that we've built has been very, very carefully built, and it's been built by employing all locally, sourcing locally, and being a very responsible company in the community. So, the Hot Chili brand has given us a very big leg up in our approach to our environmental impact assessment, and our strategy to tie in water supply to the communities with developing this regional strategic water business tied into our mine development Costa Fuego has been something that you would really look at in this industry and say that is unique, because we're not going to be just providing jobs for construction and then for mining going on over multiple decades. What Hot Chili is going to be doing is really changing the intergenerational situation within the area we operate, and that's by providing water to the Huasco region and its communities. And so by doing that, we become a very, very different entity for the valley. So while we're talking about Huasco Water, most of you know this is a strategic asset that the company has been pushing. It's something that really we did not intend. We applied for water licenses because we found a discovery. We realised we could use seawater to process it with better recovery, and so we applied for a licence to take water out of the ocean. And at that point in Chile, you could take water out of the ground for the mining industry. So the regulation changes in Chile have put Hot Chili in a position that it's holding the only licence in the entire Huasco region to take water out of the ocean. And we're in one of the largest clusters of undeveloped projects in the world. And we have a very, very keen valley to access industrial scale water supply for agro-industrial purposes and for drinking water and for the general elevation of this part of Chile. So we found ourselves with quite a responsibility to the area in which we operate, but also a very, very large business opportunity here. In the background, we've been applying for a second maritime licence so we could have a dedicated maritime licence to supply desalinated water to this area. That's not far off. And once we have that, we'll be bringing together our commercial discussions with our large off-takers in the area, most of them large miners, and our discussions with potential major water investors that have been progressively going through Chile and buying these strategic water assets off of mining companies. And it's really now a bit of a partnership that is starting to occur in Chile. Big industrial players coming in to build and finance the water infrastructure needs of the Chilean mining industry because of water preservation. And so this is a very, very hot jurisdiction for investment. It means that Hot Chili has a number of the largest names in water in the world that are talking to the company about this project, and very, very interested major miners that all want to know how to get access to water and not have to go through a 10-year approval process, which Hot Chili did. So this asset will become very, very important for the company in terms of its financing requirement. We're advancing this in parallel with the timetable of Costa Fuego. So this is FID in 29, just like Costa Fuego for the seawater supply in green. But then after that, we start to move on to a much larger project and probably look at selling Hot Chili's position down in this desalinated water opportunity to provide the capital to fund our copper development without diluting our shareholders. And that is a very critical aspect of our capital strategy. So hopefully that's given a little bit more insight into some of the more key areas for Hot Chili. This year we stand in front of a number of catalysts. If I had to guess which catalyst comes first, and that's because guidance is just that, guidance is based around what we know now, is that we're probably likely to see a second water license in the coming months from the government. And so that will trigger value for our shareholders, because I would dare say that very little value is being attributed to our water assets. And that's probably fair at the moment. So putting see-through value, much the same way as 1.1% for 30 million US provides a strong see-through value on a royalty, or as a major strategic investor in Hot Chili would provide a large see-through value for the company. This water business could do exactly that, something that's worth nothing when finding yourself in a position where you're selling an asset like Antofagasta did for $600 million to a consortium that's now built their seawater expansion plans for Centinela and is supplying them water. So it's an asset that I don't want the market to ever underestimate. The water business is probably just as important as the copper business to the world's future in probably two of the most critical commodities of our age. So that's really enough on Huasco Water, and I'll probably open it to the floor to any questions around drilling or around our activities. But rest assured, we probably are about to go through a period of a significant amount of drilling news flow as we approach that resource milestone at the end of the year, and then that restated pre-feasibility, and then following into that, our environmental impact assessment submission.
Hold on,
Scott,
I got a microphone here.
all the way from Sydney.
Hi, Christian. Good morning. Thank you on behalf of all the shareholders and myself in particular for what can only be described as a transformational year. I mean, it took you 17 years to get to a net present value after tax of 1.2 billion. In addition to the copper price, that's a massive uplift, but the real impact has been the transformation of the whole project with La Verde. In the last 12 months, you've essentially doubled the value of the operation, and there's just so much upside, the water and the like. So congratulations to yourself, the board, Jose, and the whole team, because it's been an extraordinary year. So my question is, what's the size of the prize? Where do we go from here? Is there a comparable analogue that you can share with us that you think that might give us a see-through understanding of where Hot Chili has the potential to go to?
Yeah, sure, Scott. Thanks. I really appreciate the feedback. It has been a big year after many, many years of persistence. So to see the share price re-rating is very positive for shareholders. So our plan is to continue to re-rate that, to drive that PNAV to a position where it's about double where we are now. lift that valuation ceiling to a 5 multiple for our shareholders in the immediate future. But you asked me what's the size of the prize for hot chili? Why have I been here for 18 years? Is it madness in the family? Possibly. But look, I think these big projects like this, they obviously take on average 21 years to get into production. It's why they're so rare. It's why the copper price is going where it is. So a company like Hot Chili is either a company that becomes a unicorn and transitions itself through to first production, and that's a hell of a big prize to aim for. And it's what all of the core people of Hot Chili that have stayed with me all of this time, the Jose Ignacios of the world, that have been absolutely central to what we've done. We all shared a vision, and was to turn this company into a producer. We've never changed our vision. We've never taken any shortcuts. Everything's been done methodically to get us to that point. However, this business is a funny business. The transfer of that hard work by juniors to majors is well known, and that transfer of ownerships often makes shareholders a lot of money. So, I imagine Hot Chili holding a prize like this that's been built over 18 years. It means we either are the next Oz Minerals or the Equinox of the industry, and what does that look like? That's an $8-10 billion company producing this kind of metal, and probably more given the metal market prices that we're moving into. Or what does a Hot Chili look like being taken by a larger player early? And and that multiple certainly is probably heading towards around a 5 multiple. So while that might look very attractive for some shareholders might share the view that it looks more attractive in 4 or 5 years when we're one of the very few large-scale independent mid-tier producers. So both very attractive prizes. One more shorter term, I would have thought that the P/NAV ratios in the industry are heading towards probably at least a 5 multiple implication there for the company. And I would think that if Hot Chili was able to transform itself into a producer, then that would make the people of Hot Chili and our shareholders, our long-term shareholders. And you've got to remember, we've had one of the stickiest registers in this business. You wonder why Hot Chili is still here. We had 32 copper developers that didn't make it in the last cycle from the Australian market. On the other side of that, there was 3 of us. And then it's been a very, very hard slog from 2019 as we rebuilt with Cortadera and now into Leva. So this is a real industry of grit, and not a lot of CEOs and not a lot of teams will get a company this far. Most of the takeovers happened before this. So now we start to go through this big de-risking phase, and this is also something that the market gets a little wrong. In the retail and the junior end of the market, de-risking is just a word, and it doesn't add value to the share price. And it's things that you hear about in announcements that are, I guess, the boring parts of the announcement. When you get to this point of a development, that de-risking, those final permits, they are money in the bank to shareholders. Those things add hundreds of millions of dollars to bottom lines on any BD team looking at Hot Chili. So when I say an EIA gets submitted next year and you guys are looking at a resource catalyst, that's huge. The pre-feas numbers, that's huge. The EIA being submitted for the mining industry, for the global copper sector, that's the most important thing that they're waiting for, because that puts us into the system. And Chile is one of the top-tier mining jurisdictions. And we don't have a lot of risk once we're entered into the system, particularly with 10 years of homework done. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an answer on what the prize might be. And I'm sure everyone can turn that into maths and work out what the share price might look like.
Thanks, Christian.
Excellent. Well, hopefully that means that I've addressed everything and you can finish your orange juices and breakfast. And I want to thank everyone for coming so early in the morning.